So yeah, I am the Associate Curator of Performance and Manager of Public Programs at the New Museum, where I've been working since 2007. And I worked with Jennifer last year, exactly this time, on a project called Performance Archiving Performance, which was a sort of multi-platform presentation of 4 different projects by artists, performing artists who were thinking about archive as a medium and how performance might present a record of itself. The different sort of, it was multi-platform because it existed as a really intimate resource center exhibition on our 5th floor gallery on our 5th floor at the New Museum. There were a series of public programs in the theater. There were also a series of performances that happened as well. Jennifer presented the video installation, which I think you're going to see tonight, which is a work by Robin Bishal. She also presented the digital archive component of Live Dancing Archive. And then there was a group of objects and artifacts, ephemera, from her process of research that she's accumulated since she began this project. It's research in 2000 and Live Dancing Archive properly in 2011. So as part of her engagement at the museum, she also did a performance with Jeff Kolar. Jeff, are you here? I don't think he's here. Okay, he's getting ready. He's getting ready for the show. So he's the composer for Live Dancing Archive. But they organized an improvised performance called Skyrim Concert with Jeff Kolar and Jennifer Monson on October 24th, 2013. It took place in the New Museum Skyrim, which has these beautiful panoramic views of Lower Manhattan on the Bowery. And was anyone other than you? Was anyone there for this? Were you there as well? Okay. So I want to get back to that because I want to hear you guys talk a little bit about what you remember from that evening. One of the things about that particular performance was that it was performed in total darkness except for the illumination that was provided by the skyline of Lower Manhattan. There was a light, there was also like an exit sign light, and there were some other things. Anyway, I don't want to give details that I remember. I want to hear the details that our colleagues. It started at 7 p.m., I believe. Yeah, and it was, I don't want to give too many details around it because I think it's going to be interesting to hear how different people remember that piece. Part of the project of Performance Archiving Performance was looking at the way in which these artists were thinking about documentation and archiving methodologies as a way for the museum itself to reevaluate its own practices of documentation and archiving performance, and to have sort of an open dialogue with artists about what was it that we needed to think about, where could we have improved, what things should we standardize, what things should be in negotiation with artists, where does the curator fall in all of that. So those are things that we're actually still thinking about. It's an ongoing process, and pretty much as a result of all of this work, now we have during our pre-production meetings for performances, not only are we talking about the performance itself and how that work is going to be realized, but we're also talking about what sort of record of this performance do we want to produce, and how do we want to go about producing it, and how will that record be described within the framework of our digital archive, which is designed to hold the records that we produce. So all sorts of inventive ideas come up around that. Jennifer's work in particular presents really interesting challenges and questions sort of traditional documentation and archiving practices, which I think is probably a place from which this whole project for her began, was trying to sort of think outside of the standard parameters. So as part of her engagement at the museum, she created a pamphlet of scores for archiving indeterminate systems, which these are scores. I'm going to hand these out. These are scores. Oh, here, actually, if you can take one and pass it down. And actually, here are some pencils as well. We're going to actually work through a couple of these scores in real time. If anyone back there wants to join us, please do. This is the audience participation moment of this pre-show talk. So these are different scores that she developed through her research, which began in 2000 with a project called Bird Brain, which was a series of tours with research artists who are dancers, following the different migratory pathways of different animals. And so the dancers, there was a tour, they would stop at different sites along those migratory pathways, and they would improvise in open air in response to that environment where they knew those animals were at that moment. And this work, they developed these scores in the process of all of that research. And the scores, during that process, they were also sort of journaling and taking photographs, and also, I believe, Robin and perhaps some other people were taking video. And this was sort of the seed, were the seeds of what was to become the live dancing archive, or at least the content of the online digital archive. So what I would like you to do is actually, instead of reading it right now, flip it over. And I'm going to, well, you probably actually, we will probably only need to flip it over. So we're going to do at least one of these scores right now. And for everyone that's participating, just sort of be aware of your surroundings, because you will get up and move around in the space. So first, let's all stand. So I'm going to read this. So my understanding is that this is the first time that she put this on paper. These scores was for the presentation at the new museum. And these pamphlets were handed out at the museum. So first of all, just sort of step into the space. All right, find a place to stand with your feet on the ground and close your eyes. Notice any variations in the surface beneath your feet and how your body adjusts its weight to these differences. Notice where the weight is falling through your feet and the connection of the surface of your feet through the surface of your shoes to what is beneath you. Sense how gravity is pulling you gently toward the center of the earth. Now shift your awareness up to the surface of the skin of your face. What kind of light is falling on your face? What does the movement of air feel like? Notice the movement of the breath as the air passes through the lips and or nostrils and fills your lungs, passing back out from the body, slightly warmer and holding a bit more moisture from its interaction with the interior of your body. Watch the movement of the breath rising and falling in your torso, along the sides, front and back of the body. Once you feel you have fully arrived into this place where your 2 feet are standing, With your eyes still closed, turn to face north. Okay, so now is the time when we open our eyes and we go back to our pamphlets that I handed out with your pens. I hope everyone has a pen. So with your pamphlets turned over, just on the back, if you'll write down, just scribble some notes to yourself. How did you determine which direction is north? And what does north mean to you? All right, when you sort of come to a satisfactory end to those thoughts, if you'll join me back standing again. So if you'll stand and close your eyes one more time. This time, well, first, I would like you to find your north again. And now, knowing where your north is, turn to face your home. This can be defined any way you like. Where you were born, where you slept the night before, where your great-grandparents are from, etc. So hold on to those thoughts. With your eyes still closed, listen to a sound that is very close to you. It could even be a sound inside your body. Take several minutes. Well, we might not take several minutes, but take a few moments to fully listen to this sound. Now listen to the sound that is farthest from you, farthest from what you can hear, and listen to that sound fully for several moments. Imagine the space between the close sound and the far away sound. What is in that space? Can you measure the distance? What does the space feel like? All right, so let's open our eyes, and it's another journal moment. How did you determine which direction was home? How did you define home? What other homes came to mind? draw a map that shows where you are now in relationship to all of these different homes. Take a moment to describe the close sound. And take another moment to describe the far sound. Now, from wherever you are in the room, identify an object that is very close to you. Notice as many details as possible about this object: its color, its shape, its texture, how long it's been there. How long do you think it will be there? What do you know about it? What don't you know about it? Some thoughts on that, responses to those questions. And now identify an object that is very far away from you, but that you can still see. Extrapolate the same details that you noticed in the close object: its color, its shape, its texture, how long it's been there, how long do you think it will be there, what do you know about it, and what don't you know about it. Now consider the sense the space between these objects and what is in that space. Can you measure it? And what does that space feel like? There's one more, and then we'll discuss. Start to notice movement. Identify movement that is very near to you. Describe the quality of that movement. Is the movement deliberate or not? What or whom do you think is causing this movement? And why? And finally, to do the binary of that, identify a movement that is very far away from you? How far away can you detect movement? Describe the quality of that movement. Is it deliberate or not? What or whom do you think is causing this movement? And why? So that's a score called Orientation from this pamphlet. That's the first score in the pamphlet. There are other scores that we don't have much to do. But navigation, you have your pamphlet now. You can do these as you have time or are interested. Jennifer is actually very interested in collecting people's responses to these scores. So the pamphlet has an email address in the introduction where if you would be so kind to send your notes and thoughts to her, and especially that these were your ideas, your responses to the orientation score, I'm sure she would be really grateful. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was thinking, who has seen Jennifer's work before? Okay. And I already know you saw the Skyrim concert. Who saw the last permutation of Live Dancing Archive when it premiered the live permutation of Live Dancing Archive at the Kitchen when it premiered? You saw it. Anyone else see it? What can you tell us about that performance?
Well, I'm Megan, and I work for Island. So I've been working for Jennifer for a few years since the beginning of this project, and so I've seen a lot of iterations of this work, and I feel really privileged to have taken part in different versions of it by supporting the writing and such. But the piece at the Kitchen was a supported solo, and it archived specifically the bird brain migration, but also different scores from her personal history. And I think you'll reference some of those scores. You'll see the way that those sort of intersect tonight with maybe more of the scores that represent outdoor movement.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was interesting to do these scores inside such a static space, actually, given the fact that I've participated in these scores over the years, mainly outside. And I think that's really what is interesting to me about the Kitchen performance and the black box nature of the space and the darkness, and similarly here. I haven't seen the performance here yet. I'm really excited to experience the difference of
Did
space.
you see it in development at all?
Yeah. I've seen it a few times in development now, in the interim between.
With this work, my understanding is that it's now a quartet, or this iteration is being presented as a quartet.
So the original work was Jennifer as a solo, and Tatiana was the dresser of the work. So she played a small role in as a sort of figure in the space, but Jeff and Joe were on stage in that iteration as well. That's the lighting designer and the composer. And so 3 additional collaborators were added for this performance, but I don't know that they identify it as a quartet. I think it's much more like a large group.
Great.
They're all sort of contributing to the work. There's a trio of dancers.
Got it. Thank you.
That way. Yeah.
Yes, plus Jeff as well.
Jeff and Joe and Val now have been added.
And then there are people who are new to the research as well that are performing tonight, right? And I think that's really interesting to think about. First of all, I should say I did not see this solo at the kitchen, and I encountered Jennifer's work when I was doing research on this idea of performance, archivic performance, exclusively through the digital archive that exists of the work, and then writing around it. So my experience of what is live dancing archive is through a slightly different lens. But I think that Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, thinks of this all as one large body of work that is presenting itself in different formats. And those formats continue to evolve as her research evolves. So it's sort of two simultaneous paths of research. One that is around thinking about bodies in relationship to their environment, and then how do you create a record, how do you record that, present and catalog all of that content. What are different ways of getting at what that content actually is, and how do you describe it? So yeah, I think one thing that I'm really interested in seeing tonight, having not seen the first one as well, but I'm very interested in this idea of the dancers who are new to this research, and this idea of transmitting research that was danced by others initially through, I guess it's happening through video recordings and first-hand accounts and things like that.
Yeah, and also they've spent a lot of time in the past year together in rural environments, engaging in similar sports to this book, but also to new things that have come up based on past and present sort of discussions around archiving and engagement with the community and the body and the space.
Sure.
So I think that all of that is playing into what we'll see.
Awesome.
So it's the dancers though that are joining. I'm also really excited to see how the record is transmitted or how it goes both ways too. I think how her dancing shifts from the solo version into this now.
Yes, and then thank you. And then one thing I just wanted a thing that we have all three of us have seen or witnessed was the Sky Room concert. And so we, at the New Music, there was a discussion that I had with Jennifer moments before the performance happened, which is not the right time to have that conversation, but about, how are we going to produce a record of this event, and asking her if she wanted to have video documentation or not. And initially she resisted, and then we sort of talked about it for a little bit, and then we agreed to set up a camera at the very back of the room, and it was just locked off. And this is sort of the standard, but at the New Museum, this is sort of, until we started doing a lot of this research around and talking with artists a little bit more about different ways to best capture their work, or create a record of their work rather, the standard sort of documentation was setting up a camera at the back of the room. That was for budget reasons as well. So anyway, so we produced a document like that, and it's a really interesting document because it was shot in this space. It's obviously completely dark except for the skyline, and every now and then you see this sort of twinkle where the dancing bodies get between the camera and the lights. And to me, within this space of research that I was doing with with performance archiving performance, it's a really important document as sort of like it really shows and highlights the limitations of video documentation. And for that reason, it's a very important document for me to be able to use, and I'm very glad that we have it. And I recently shared it with Jennifer because we just actually published a conversation that she and I had through this project on our blog. It's called, if you go to the New Museum website and click blog at the top, you'll get to the 6 Degrees online publication, and there's a conversation that was just published anyway, but you can see the documentation, the video documentation, and hear us talk about this whole thing. But I'm wondering sort of if you guys, how we should wrap up. Yeah, okay. Well, we can have a drink later and talk and share our sort of memories of that night, because really that is really the best documentation of that event, I think. I wrote my thoughts out for Jennifer as a record, and I find myself getting very poetic. I don't know if you guys felt the same way as you were writing out your thoughts in response to the questions that I was asking, but I wasn't even trying. I was just trying to describe what happened, and it suddenly went into this poetic space, and I was like, what am I doing? But anyway, so that with this really weird video documentation is what exists for me as a memory of this piece. Anyway, with that, I'm very excited to see what happens tonight, and hope that everyone produces a record inside of themselves of what they see tonight and takes that away with them, and perhaps even contacts Jennifer to share that with her. So, thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you all so much.